Hi guys, and welcome to my new Sopranos analysis video, clam broth, a butter knife, and a corner table. In the 5th season of The Sopranos, a spate of imprisoned mobsters is released. One of them, of course, is Feechs
Feechs, released just this week. A man greatly feared and respected in the 70s.
A legendary mobster who was supposedly made on the other side. As we all know, Feechs loved telling stories from the old days. In one of his famous stories, he references an unseen character named Tommy Pinto, as Adriana reminds him of Pinto's Gumar.
My compliments.
Oh, happy. Thank you, baby. You drove Tommy Pinto?
I was at the clam broth house the night he beat that longshoreman to death over a corner table.
No, sir. Here we go. Memory lane.
It's important these young guys know the history.
Tell them about the time.
Of course, little Polly and Benny want to hear more because Tommy Pinto was supposedly a legendary mobster, to which Feechs replies, "I was there the night at the clam broth house that he beat that longshoreman to death over a corner table." Tony interrupts as he is sick of hearing Feechs' stories. As Tony does not let him finish, I will take this strand and dive into Mafia history in the hopes of elaborating where the writers were drawing from when writing this line and this small piece of Feechs' backstory. So if we go back in Mafia history, we'll discover a man named Nicky Scarfo. Scarfo wanted to be a boxer, but when that didn't work out, he joined up with his uncles from his mother's side and became an apprentice in the mob. His uncles were part of the Philadelphia mob family and by extension, South Jersey as well. I think this is part of the reason why Scarfo's life was mined for this episode, because of his Jersey connection.
Federal investigators say that since 1981, Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo has reigned over Philadelphia and Atlantic City as one of the nation's most violent mafia bosses.
After rising up and becoming made, it was proposed that he should marry the daughter of the family's consigliere, Joe Ruginetta. Scarfo, however, wasn't just not interested. He called Ruginetta's daughter ugly. This caused a rift, which was eventually smoothed over. However, it didn't leave a good taste in the mouth of the consigliere or the boss, Angelo Bruno. Scarfo was brash and violent, and his loud mouth and antics made the higher-ups nervous. This finally escalated when Nicky Scarfo and his close friend, Chucky Merlino, went to eat at the Oregon Diner in Philly. Scarfo entered and discovered that his favorite booth was occupied by an Irish longshoreman. Nicky and his Napoleonic complex began to berate the man before it finally turned into a full-on fight. During the struggle, the longshoreman, much bigger, got the upper hand and was choking Scarfo until he grabbed a butter knife and stabbed the man to death.
Yeah, you got a fight with a guy in a diner, and the guy's choking him, and he's reaching, he grabs a butter knife, and he sticks it in the guy, and it hits his heart, and the guy dies.
Here, I think, is the inspiration for Feechs' story. Scarfo stabbed a longshoreman to death with a butter knife over a diner booth. Scarfo was arrested along with his pal and spent 6 months in prison for manslaughter. Following this incident, Angelo Bruno had had enough. Bruno wanted things in Philly nice and quiet to avoid police interference and making ways for the rackets. Bruno banished Scarfo to Atlantic City. At that time, AC was a decaying seaside town long past its prime. Scarfo let his resentment fester. Even though he was a made man, he tended bar and eked out a living, shaking down dirty bookstores and loan sharking. In the end, it was a blessing in disguise. After sticking it out in the city for many years, in the 1970s, a referendum led to the legalization of gambling, and Scarfo was in the perfect place to exploit its riches. AC was still in the territory of the Philly mob, and Angelo Bruno wanted nothing to do with the impending legal headaches that could come from the mob plundering the city's soon-to-be-built casinos. The authorities had already learned from Las Vegas and were on high alert for any organized crime activity or attempt to infiltrate and own the casinos. Without describing the entire history of both the Philly mob and Atlantic City, I'll say a power struggle broke out in the family for who would control the lucrative new city. The New York families in particular wanted a piece of the action and tried to reason with Angelo Bruno. In the end, however, Bruno was killed with a strong suspicion that the New York family was involved. The reason being his reluctance to get involved in Atlantic City. Eventually, Scarfo was elevated to the head of the Philly family and began getting himself stuck into the ancillary businesses of running and operating casinos. This is where I'll end things for now, as the rest of his meteoric rise and downfall is a long story. But, to bring it back to the original Sopranos reference, this is clearly what they're referring to when Feechs tells his story about Tommy Pinto.